It was the calm before the storm in 1941. December 7th, 1941 happened 85 years ago this year. The next few pictures will show you what happened during 1941. Things in America in 1941 was mostly business as usual. President FDR would be taking photo ops with his family before the press, as seen here in this picture. Christmas time was a normal celebration like any other in America. 3 weeks before Christmas would actually be celebrated by people would carry on as a normal activities took place. There was celebrations and camaraderie around the Christmas tree. There was virtually no hurry or worries in life in 1941. Bing Crosby sang the #1 Christmas song for 1941, which was called White Christmas. Ah, life was good. In 1941, the United States has stopped sending oil to Japan. These oil tankers stopped sailing to Japan to try and bring Japan to the negotiations table and bring peace between these two nations. However, what fueled the events leading up to the breakdown of negotiations between Japan and America was the sinking of oil tankers by the Imperial Japanese Navy in the Pacific Ocean. Negotiations between Japan and the United States were desperate to avert a war between these two nations. However, time was ticking away and time was slowly slipping away to make and keep the peace. Bing Crosby and Rosemary would still be singing the #1 Christmas song, White Christmas. Would this Christmas of 1941 be a good one or a somber one? Only time will tell. Secretary of State Cordell Hull would call 2 Japanese negotiators to Washington, D.C., discuss about bringing peace and hope for both the nations to work together and solve their differences. Here is a picture map of how the world looked like during the 1930s and what Imperial Japan controlled land-wise. Japan and America at one time had very good relationships with each other, seen here in this picture. This Imperial Japanese leader, seen here in this picture, would be drawing up war plans to sneak attack Pearl Harbor should the peace negotiations fail. Indeed, many things were happening throughout the world, and in the United States in 1941. Americans would carry on with their life while negotiations were ongoing between Japan and the United States. Imagine what it must have been like being on a battleship during World War II. You're on board a ship with over 1,000 other shipmates sailing around the ocean blue. The next few pictures will show some of the other battleships that were in service but not at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked. Americans would watch the 1941 World Series between the New York Yankees and the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Yankees would eventually win so many World Series in a row, people would just call them those damn Yankees. These Dodgers would still stay in Brooklyn, New York till 1959. These 1941 New York Yankees would already have 8 World Series titles behind their name in 1941. The Yankees would be the most team to win the most World Series titles in baseball history. During the year of 1941, many movies were popular for the American people to attract their attention, such as the next few pictures will show. Again, the Americans were just going about their usual business with life. Actress Bette Davis would make it big time in this movie titled The Great Lie. This is the Bette Davis who would play on her last television show called The Golden Girls. This movie titled The Great Ziegfeld. This too would be another popular movie in 1941. This movie titled Ball of Fire would include the actress Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck would become most popular on the regular Western television titled The Big Valley. Abbott and Costello, seen here in this picture, made their audience laugh with their own kind of silly humor in 1941. The two most popular movies they made together were titled But Private and Hold That Ghost. And Bing Crosby keeps singing his popular Christmas song, White Christmas. While halfway across the world in Japan, the Japanese were practicing for their possible sneak attack against the U.S. While there were 8 battleships moored at Ford Island in Hawaii, there were other battleships that would make history during World War II as well. Well, it's that time once again to pour yourself another warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in your easy chair, relax, and enjoy the next few pictures of some of the other battleships that were a part of World War II. Before World War II began, the U.S. Navy had a total of some 23 battleships sailing the ocean blue. Imagine being on one of those powerful battleships while shooting those mighty guns off was an experience that a sailor would never forget when they returned home from the war. The next few pictures will show what it must have been like on those mighty battleships. These Japanese pilots would be practicing their sneak attack on Pearl Harbor nearby their own islands. Imperial Japanese spy Takeo Yoshikawa, seen here in this picture, was a part of the Imperial Japanese Navy intelligence and lived from 1912 to 1993. All this Japanese spy had to do was watch and observe the coming and going of ships at Pearl Harbor, and then report back to his superiors what he knew. Well, it's that time once again to pour yourself another warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in the easy chair, relax, and enjoy the next few pictures about things that happened before Pearl Harbor. While negotiations were going on between Japan and the United States, the Imperial Japanese Navy pilots were practicing their sneak attack skills. The Americans were using a machine to do one important task. And that one task would be to find out what those sneaky Imperial Japs were being sneaky about. Here's a picture of the code machine breaker called Purple. This machine was used by the U.S. Army and Navy intelligence and could decode messages from Tokyo, Berlin, and Rome. The next few pictures will show you the activities of the code breakers. While negotiations were going on with General MacArthur and Japanese negotiator Hiroshito, as seen here in this picture, the next picture will show you the man who would lead the Japanese pilots to Pearl Harbor. Captain Matsuda Fuchida, 1902-1973. This man would be the lead pilot for the other Imperial Japanese pilots flying towards Pearl Harbor. This man would, some 32 years later, die after attacking Pearl Harbor, dying in 1973. While negotiations were going on between the Japanese and the Americans, there was another kind of talk going on as well. The Americans were gathering intelligence about a potential planned attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japs, as seen here in this picture. Yet life in America would continue to go on with the Americans, such as seen in the next picture. While talks were going on between Japan and the U.S., big bands were very popular with the general public, and Glenn Miller, seen here in this picture with his trombone, was the #1 orchestra in 1941. The #1 band song of 1941 was Chattanooga Choo Choo. Life was good in 1941, as the next few pictures will show you the different bands and band dancing events. Artie Shaw and his orchestra. Jimmy Dorsey and his orchestra. Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra. Duke Ellington and his orchestra. Life was basically good in 1941. But time was running out to make peace with Japan and the United States. Japanese negotiators Nomura and Kurosu arrived in Washington, D.C. on November 27, 1941. Japan desperately wanted to get out of China, but refused to leave Manchuria. It would appear that Prime Minister Konoe's peace proposal would arrive dead on arrival. Time was slowly running out for the United States and Japan to make peace with each other. Soon the United States would become a victim of another sneak attack that the Imperial Japanese military was known for. Soon the Americans would find out that the good life would be forever changed. And Bing Crosby still kept singing the popular song titled White Christmas. Army and Navy intelligence were trying desperately to find out what the messages were meaning when Imperial Japan were constantly singing them to the fleet. The next few pictures will show you the decoders at their job. Women indeed played a major role in helping the U.S. military fight the war on two fronts in World War II. The next few pictures will show just how the women played a big role in World War II. Poster girls. Here are two iconic posters seen below with two women where one woman encourages women to work in factories while the other encourages men to join the Navy. Factory workers. Women would help produce ammunition parts of the war machine and other types of military needs as well. Women nurses. Women would help tend to the wounded sailors and soldiers to help them recover from their battle wounds. Navy waves. Waves would serve as nurses, yeomen, and other duties as needed. Parenting. Some women would be a stay-at-home mother, helping to raise the children while dad was off to the Navy. Soon the Imperial Japanese Navy would leave Japan and sail towards Hawaii. While the negotiations were going on between the U.S. and Japan, eventually the 11th hour deal to keep the peace would soon dissolve. 6 Imperial Japanese aircraft carriers depart from Hidakapu Bay and the Kurili Islands on November 26, 1941. The 6 aircraft carriers were Ikegai, Keiga, Soryo, Hosho, Shokego, and Suho. Seen here in this picture, sails towards their destination, the Hawaiian Islands. The Imperial Japanese military was known for their sneak attacks on their enemies. Islands by the Japanese Navy. The negotiators from both sides had no more than 2 weeks left to avert the most disastrous attack ever on American territory. Here is a picture of Battleship Row with the other ships moored or anchored nearby Ford Island. 2 important things were missing here when the attack happened, which were aircraft carriers and submarines. The next few pictures will show you the battleships that were involved on this attack on December 7th, 1941. USS Arizona, BB-39, named after the 48th State of the Union. Launch date, 15th of June, 1915. Length, 608 feet. Weight, 29,630 tons. Speed, 21 knots, or 24 miles an hour. Commander, Captain Franklin Van Valkenburg. From 1880 to 1941. Age, 53. Was killed in action on a bridge when a bomb was dropped on it, but he fought valiantly till the end. USS Arizona, BB-39. Armament, 12 .45 caliber 14-inch guns and triple gun turrets. Torpedo defense, 22 .51 caliber 5-inch guns. 4 caliber 3-inch guns to fight enemy aircraft. 2 torpedo tubes mounted on both sides of the ship with 24 torpedoes to defend itself. USS West Virginia, BB-48. Commander, Captain Marvin Sharp Benyon. Named after its state. Date launch, 17th November 1921. Length, 824 feet. Weight, 34,130 tons. Speed, 21 knots, or 21 miles per hour. Crew, 1,1305 sailors. Captain Marvin Sharp Benyon, 1887 to 1941, earned the Congressional Medal of Honor after the Pearl Harbor attack. USS Utah, BB-31. Commander, Captain James M. Steele, 1916 to 1977. Retired from the U.S. Navy in 1946. Launch date, 23rd of December, 1909. Length, 521 feet, 6 inches. Weight, 21,825 tons. Speed, 21 knots, or 24 miles per hour. Crew, 1,001 sailors. Contain an anti-aircraft guns. USS Nevada, BB-36, named after the 36th State of the Union. Launch date, 11th July 1914. Length, 583 feet long. Weight, 27,800 tons. Crew, 1,500 sailors. Commander, Captain Cecil C. Adele. USS Pennsylvania, BB-38. Commander, Captain Henry B. Wilson. Launch date 30th April 1919. Length 608 feet. Weight 32,429 tons. Crew 1,159 sailors. USS Maryland, BB-46, named after the 7th State of the Union. Nicknamed Old Mary. Commander, Captain D.C. Goodwin. Launch date, 20th March 1920. Length, 624 feet. Weight, 32,600 tons. On board, 4 float planes. Crew, 1,080 sailors. USS California, BB-44. Commander, Captain J.W. Bunsley. Launch date, 25th of October, 1916. 624 feet. Weight, 33,720 tons. Speed, 21 knots or 24 miles per hour. Crew number, 1,083 sailors. USS Pennsylvania, BB-38. Commander, Captain Henry B. Wilson. Launch date, 16th March 1915. Length, 608 feet. Weight, 32,429 tons. 2 float planes, 2 catapults. Number of crew, 1,159 sailors. Well, that's that time once again to pour yourself another warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in your easy chair, relax, and Enjoy the next few pictures of the battleships we are talking about. Negotiations were not going very well between Japan and the United States. So while these discussions were going on, the United States had something else going on behind the scene. 10,000 American women were working for the U.S. Army and Navy, working on breaking the codes of the Imperial Japanese military. The Imperial Japanese Navy left the Kuril Islands on 26th of November 1941. 67 naval ships and with 6 aircraft carriers and 353 planes were sailing to their next destination, Pearl Harbor. 6 Japanese aircraft carriers carried between them some 353 planes that would attack Pearl Harbor should the negotiations fail. Japanese spy Takeo Yoshikawa left Hawaii for the last time on this Japanese luxury liner to sail back to Japan. Time was slowly ticking away between Japan and the United States to keep the peace with each other. And Bing Crosby still continues to sing his most popular Christmas song with other famous people as well, titled White Christmas. Well, it's that time once again to pour yourself another warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in the easy chair, relax, and enjoy the next few pictures of how peaceful things were before the attack on Pearl Harbor. USS Agassiz, AG-31, USS Pennsylvania, BB-38, USS Tennessee, BB-43. These sailors will be performing their last competition on December 6, 1941. The next few pictures will show their last night of R&R. negotiations were ongoing between the Imperial Japanese and the Americans, seen here in this picture below. Time was up. December 7th, 1941 would arrive sooner than one would have thought. The Imperial Japanese Navy's patience had run out, and soon America would be at war with them. Here is a picture map of what Battleship Row looked like on December 7th, 1941. These 8 battleships were moored alongside Ford Island. Finally, the codebreakers broke the Japanese codes and knew what they were going to do soon. Codes were a mathematical challenge to interpret them and put them into an alphabetical meaning seen here in this picture below. As the negotiations were running out of time, the codebreaker girls were still working hard to break the Japanese code. But when they finally broke the code and arrived at Pearl Harbor a day late, the Imperial Japanese Navy had left the Kuril Islands on November 26, 1941, and were now anchored off of the Hawaiian Islands, as seen here on this map, waiting for the orders to attack. Here is a picture map of what the surprise attack by Japanese pilots looked like. Time was up. December 7th, 1941 would soon arrive for those at Pearl Harbor. Well, it's that time once more to pour yourself another warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in an easy chair, relax, and enjoy the next few pictures of those famous battleships that once sailed the ocean blue. Here is a timeline of what would soon take place on that fateful morning of December 7th, 1941. This is a detailed timeline event of what would catch the Americans off guard while the Americans slept the night away. The newspaper gave a hint of warning that should have awakened those who were about to see their lives change forever on December 7th, 1941. USS Ward BB-139. Launch date, 1st of June 1916. Length 314 feet. Weight 1,207 tons. Speed 35 knots or 40 miles per hour. Crew 213 sailors. The USS Ward radios in the finding of a mini submarine trying to enter Pearl Harbor. This is how the mini subs were launched off of a bigger Japanese sub, seen here in this picture. Many subs like seen here in this picture below were navigated by 2 men, and 5 mini subs were launched at night before the Pearl Harbor attack. The USS Ward's end was being attacked by a kamikaze enemy plane on December 7, 1944, and sunk in the Pacific Ocean. A kamikaze plane was a plane in which the enemy pilot would deliberately fly into their enemy ship and give their life for their emperor. One can see here in this picture an attack by a Jap pilot on an American ship. The next few pictures will show you how devastating these attacks must have been. With the discovering of the enemy mini-sub by the USS Ward, the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 was only beginning. At last, Japanese Admiral Isaraki Yamamoto finally gave the order for the planes to attack Pearl Harbor. With the order to attack Pearl Harbor, the Americans were caught sleeping. Captain Mitsuo Fuchito. Captain Fuchito was given the command from Admiral Yamamoto to fly and attack Pearl Harbor. 07:55 a.m., the planes would fly over the mountains of the territory of Hawaii. Here's a picture of at least 7 potential targets that were intended to be attacked by the Japanese pilots. After months of practicing for this attack would only prove just how good the practicing paid off. 0600 hours, Admiral Yamamoto gives the orders to the Japanese pilots to fly and attack Pearl Harbor. Tora! 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 07:55 a.m., the planes would fly over the mountains of the territory of Hawaii. Here's a picture of the Japanese planes and how they flew towards Battleship Row to attack these 8 battleships. B-39 was destroyed when a bomb was perfectly dropped into the forward magazine, sinking the ship. After 50 hours, just 15 minutes after the first wave attacked Pearl Harbor, the second wave of Jap planes began their attack. Around 171 different kinds of Jap planes continued bombing Pearl Harbor, catching everyone by surprise. The second wave. Wave of the attack, the Japs used dive bombers to destroy Hickam, Wheeler, and Bells Air Base. Some 350 American planes were destroyed during the second wave, crippling the pilots from getting into the air. The Americans were left vulnerable to enemy attacks from the air while leaving the planes out in the open as seen here in this picture. Only 2 fighter pilots were able to get their planes into the air safely and bravely attack the Japs. Lieutenant Ken Taylor, Lieutenant George Welch. At 0945 hours, the Japanese planes left Pearl Harbor. The surprise attack on the Americans was over. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida wanted to launch a third wave of attack to really devastate the Americans. However, Admiral Yamato said no. Perhaps one reason he did not wish to do a third wave attack was because he was concerned about fuel consumption of his fleet to return home, and he said this is his own words. We have awakened a sleeping giant. attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 was over within 90 minutes. The Imperial Japanese Navy began to return back home to Japan. The surprise attack was a brief victory for the Imperial Japanese Navy, but in the end, it had awakened a sleeping giant that would resolve to turn the tide in their favor. Destruction was seen everywhere on the island of Hawaii. U.S. casualties, 2,403 military and 68 civilians. Damaged ships, 19. 2 light cruisers, 2 heavy cruisers, 2 seaplane tenders, 1 gunnery training ship. 8 battleships damaged, and 2 of them sunk. Both USS Arizona and Utah were sunk by the Japs. Imperial Japanese casualties were 29 planes, 5 mini-subs, 129 soldiers, 1 captured soldier. Many newspapers across the United States reported this news about the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. President FDR gave a joint speech to Congress on December 8, 1941, about the attack. This day will live in infamy. In short, Admiral Kimball was eventually relieved of his post for failing to be prepared for any kind of enemy surprise attack. Lieutenant General Walter Short was replaced by U.S. Army General Marshall, was placed in command of the Army in the Pacific. On December 25, 1941, Admiral Kimball was relieved of his command by Admiral Charles Nimitz, as seen here in this picture. Perhaps this was a divine intervention, but one of the targets that the Japs missed was these oil tanks that could have made it even more destructive. Opana Radar Station, Oahu, Hawaii. Perhaps if the soldiers manning this radar station on December 7, 1941, did so properly, they might have been able to avert the surprise attack by the Japanese. On December 8, 1941, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. Likewise, the U.S. declared war on those 2 countries as well. The Tripartite Pact was signed by the Axis on 27 September 1941, was now enacted by the declaration of war against the U.S. and its allies. When World War II began, there would rise many great Army and Navy leaders who would help the Allies win the war against the Axis. The next picture will show you who these great military leaders were. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, commanding officer of the Theater of Europe Operations. General Douglas MacArthur, commanding general of the Far East Operations. General George S. Patton, commander of the 7th Army. Perhaps one of the most famous sayings of the World War II is what was said by General MacArthur in returning back to the Philippine Islands. I have returned. General George S. Patton also had his own saying that made people take him very seriously. We've got a war to win here, and we're going to kick some butt. These three Axis leaders can be seen in the next picture. Adolf Hitler, dictator of Germany, born in Austria. Benito Mussolini, Italian dictator who sided with Germany at the beginning of the war. Hideki Toho, Japanese general and 40th Prime Minister of Japan from 1941 to 1944. While the United States began to rise back to power in the Pacific Ocean, both sides were trying to quickly and desperately be the first to build a nuclear bomb to drop on the other. The United States began what was called the Manhattan Project. This was the race to create the first atomic bomb to win the war and end it quickly. Scientist Albert Einstein, seen here in this picture below, created this famous scientific equation that means energy and mass are the same thing. Einstein indirectly would help create something very important that would help the Allies to win the war seen in the next picture. The atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project successfully tested this at Alamogordo Air Base in New Mexico on July 16, 1945. However, both sides were trying desperately to create the atomic bomb to drop on the other side first. The German Nazis developed this rocket seen here in this picture called the V-2 rocket, or also known as Vengeance Rocket 2. The British people would become terrified of this rocket being fired at them from Germany. Wernher von Braun, 1912 to 1977. This man was helping to develop the V-2 rockets for the Germans to use. Secretly, von Braun and his team of scientists stalled at fully developing this rocket because they wanted these rockets for peaceful use. Yoshio Nishina, seen here in this picture, was lead Japanese scientist to help to try to develop the atomic bomb first, seen here in this picture. Here is a picture of some of that atomic bomb part looked like. Well, it's that time once again to pour yourself a warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in your easy chair, relax, and enjoy the next few pictures of the battleships that saw action in the Pacific Ocean during World War II. While the headline news announced the beginning of World War II as seen here in this picture, the war would only last for 4 years. There were many conflicts in the Pacific arena, but the Americans had the resolve to bring the war to a quick end. The Germans would invade Poland and march easily into France. The Allies would have their hands full fighting the war on two fronts. As long as the Allies had good leaders and the will to win, it would eventually happen. While the news headlines announced what was happening with the Allies and Axis, there would be three major campaigns the U.S. would be involved with in both sides. In the Pacific, these three events made news headlines. Battle of Midway, June 3, 1942 to June 7, 1942. Battle of Leyte Gulf, October 20, 1944 to October 26, 1944. Invasion of Iwo Jima, February 19, 1945. Well, it's that time once again to pour yourself another warm cup of coffee and sit right back down in your easy chair and enjoy the next few pictures of the three main events we will be talking about on today's show. We are now going to briefly look at three major events of the Atlantic side of World War II, which are sinking of the Bismarck, May 27, 1941, Battle of the Bulge, and D-Day. German battleship Bismarck. Length 823 feet 6 inches. Weight 50,300 tons. Speed 30 knots. Crew 2,300 men. This Bismarck was the largest German battleship that sailed the Atlantic Ocean, and it did the next worst act of all during World War II, as seen in the next picture. The Bismarck is firing at the HMS Hood, the battleship of England, as seen here in this picture. HMS Hood was sunk by the German ship Bismarck on May 24, 1941. It only took 3 minutes for the Hood to sink to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. 1,415 men were lost and only 3 survived. This headline news shook the British people the next day. The hunt for the battleship Bismarck was on. May 24, 1941 to May 27, 1941. The British Navy finally caught up with the Bismarck, and Bismarck would fight its last battle with them. The HMS cruiser Dorsetshire hit the Bismarck with 3 torpedoes. The Bismarck took 100 minutes to sink to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Only 110 men survived, but the captain did not. This is where the Bismarck now lays, at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The Bismarck lays 15,700 feet in the Atlantic Ocean. Our second important event of World War II on the Atlantic front is this one called Battle of the Bulge, December 18, 1944 to January 25, 1945. General Dwight D. Eisenhower would be the supreme general who would lead the Americans to victory in this battle. The battle took place between Belgium and Luxembourg, as seen here on this map in this picture. The battle would prove to be Adolf Hitler's last chance to win World War II. At the end of the Battle of the Bulge, this was the result of that battle. 75,000 American soldiers died, 15,000 suffered from cold injuries such as frostbites, colds, and other winter sickness. The Germans, however, lost between 80 and 100,000 soldiers. Meanwhile, towards the end of the Second World War, the Americans would experience a different kind of attack, and would eventually develop technology to overcome what was called kamikaze, that usually meant divine wind or God. However, the Americans would come up with solving how to destroy the kamikaze before they got them, as seen in the next few pictures. Anti-aircraft guns helped to shoot the kamikaze planes down. German U-boats. While the Japanese had many subs, the Germans created what was called U-boats, or underwater boats. There was usually 50 German sailors on the U-boat, while there were 80 on an American submarine. Hitler had ordered some 800 U-boats during the war, and this picture shows how they were all sunk by depth charges. At long last, the war against Japan finally came to an end on this unique plane commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, as seen here in this picture. The atom bomb was flown on this B-29 Boeing Super Fortress heading for Japan. The first one was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The second one was dropped on Nagasaki by the second B-29 plane called Boxcar. The second city was bombed on August 9th, 1945. Japan formally surrenders on September 2nd, 1945. Japan surrenders signing the documents on board the USS Missouri, seen here in this picture. On June 6, 1944, the Allies began to invade Germany by storming the beaches of Normandy, France. This was also called Operation Overlord, where some 160,000 American soldiers participated in this invasion. The Germans finally surrendered to the Allies on May 7, 1945, where Field Marshal Gutthof signed the papers. Adolf Hitler had shot himself to death just before the Russian army came close to capture him. Italy decided to join up with the Allies on October 13, 1943. At last, the war would eventually come to an end, and the world would be at peace for at least 5 years till the next war would happen.